man. Watch out! It's a woodpecker from space.
Back to the sculpture, and I am just about finished with this Hellboy sculpture. Now the point of doing a relief like this is that I plan on casting this out of polyurethane rubber and make multiple casts out of plaster for this. Plaster is extremely cheap, and I bought like a ton of, I think it was like a 100-pound bag of this plaster that's very cheap. There's different ways of casting. You could even go to Home Depot and get like some Portland cement and make a cast of it as well, and it would look kind of cool outside of your yard. But the goal of making a relief like this is that it hangs on a wall. And we've all seen like drawing casts and like hands that kind of just hang on walls. That's kind of like the goal behind this, is to get this in a way that's like I can just hang it on multiple houses, if I ever buy multiple houses, of course. But I'll probably be making a few casts of this and then showing you guys how to make the cast. Now remember, I am not very good at making casts. I'm not very good at like making like the silicone, the polyurethane. I usually tend to mess it up, but I have done these reliefs, these head reliefs that don't require like a two-part system. So this is a one-part thing that I can do, and I think it should be fairly easy to do. And then hopefully I'm going to show you guys how to cast that mold in plaster. And plaster is super cheap. It is really like one of the cheapest things you can do to cast any sort of sculpture or toy or whatever. But when you're working at this scale, which is I guess a little bit over life size, it's a lot cheaper to use plaster instead of like some sort of rubber or plastic. And the only issue that I think I would have is the cigar, because then the silicone kind of gets wrapped around it, because you put like a shell of rubber and then you just kind of pull it out. So you don't want anything to kind of hurt it as you're pulling it out, including the chin. So a lot of the times the polyurethane and silicones that you use, there's a lot of flex. So you can kind of like stretch it as you lift off the plaster after you cast it. You can actually pull it from the very top. The horns are really not going to get in the way too much, and then you just kind of peel it back, and it should reveal a nice replica of this. And you know, the oil-based clay is really nice to use. I love using oil-based clay. Water-based clay, I think, gives me the most flexibility, but there's that problem with using a kiln to fire. But I've had subscribers from various parts of the world, Thailand, Philippines, who don't have access to a kiln, but I think it's a lot harder to have access to polyurethane and silicone for making a mold. So it really depends where you are in the world. In the United States, it's very easy to get any of these products. Reynolds Materials is actually in Pennsylvania, so it's like 2 or 3 hours away from here. And that's where they actually make a lot of the silicone and rubber stuff for the East Coast. And there's a lot of industries everywhere around here. It's oily right now because in this mug, it's not espresso, it is mineral spirits. Smooth out the clay. You can put it in a little cup and then use brushes to blend things. What it does, it kind of melts the oil-based clay down a little bit, and it does the almost exactly the same thing as water when you're working with water-based clay. With water-based clay, it's a lot easier. You just kind of spray it, and almost immediately you can do all sorts of techniques on it. But on this, you put it onto the hard clay, and it takes a little bit of time to activate and melt the clay a little bit. This clay, of course, is Jmac clay. It's J. McLaughlin clay, and it's an alternative to using monster clay. At the time when I bought this, I thought, I'm going to try monster clay, and then I looked at the prices and I thought, oh, that's really expensive. So I got 50 pounds or 40 pounds of this, very inexpensive relative to monster clay. But I do want to try monster clay in the future, so stay tuned for that, because that seems to be what a lot of people use. The downside of this is a medium and it tends to be kind of soft. The weather's changing in the United States, in the DC area, so my studio is getting hotter, and this is becoming a lot harder to do fine detail when it gets hotter. And it almost, if you scrape it, it tends to kind of grab a little of the clay, which I don't like. I've used clay before, Sargent. They kind of lend itself a little bit better to doing detailed sculptures. So if you have like the horns, for example, you could do a lot more detail in a hard clay as opposed to a soft clay like this. This medium, it's a general kind of clay to use, but it's not perfect in any sense. But it is very good, and it does give you like a very almost terracotta water-based clay style. So if you are coming from a water-based clay, this is the clay for you. We're nearing the end of the sculpture. I'm just about done, and I really just have to finalize some of the details. And by details, I basically use these very sharp dental tools. And if I want to get in here, for example, and make it a little bit sharper, I'll do that. I'll put like a very strong light from the side, that way I can see the shadows a lot better. One of the prominent things about Hellboy is that it is superciliary arch right over here. It's really massive because the horn is kind of pushed down, and I think I could have exaggerated that more, and I'm still thinking about increasing the size of his cranium, but I think at this point, I think I'm okay with it. One of the things that bothers me are the ears, because I did not have a lot of reference for doing the sculptures for the ears. I didn't have reference, so if I had a little bit more reference, it would have been a little bit better. If you have an idea of future projects for me, post up in the comments below. If you want to learn any part of sculpture, I can probably work on some videos in the future as well. So right now I don't have a future project in mind yet, and I do have a couple ideas, but I'm not quite sure. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate it, and if you have any comments, you have any questions about the sculpture, make sure you post in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you in the next video.